With Monster Hunter Wilds, there is so much to explore and understand for successfully taking down its myriad of monsters. There are new mechanics like wounds, changing weather, focus mode, and more to master. Here are 15 tips and tricks to keep in mind, all spoiler-free, that should help provide an edge. Rainy forecast. It's important to remember the environmental conditions when setting out on a hunt, but it never hurts to know when the weather could change. On the world map, hit square on PS5 and check the environmental overview. It will tell you precisely how long the current weather and time of day will last. Since certain monsters only appear under specific conditions, like Raydao during sand tides, which isn't always the case, you can plan accordingly. Rocky Mountains. Those boulders that usually hang overhead through environments like windward plains, they won't always be present, leading to awkward moments. Specifically, didn't there used to be a boulder here? And no, I'm not talking about pop-in issues. Once again, the environmental overview is the ticket, highlighting a surge of these and other things. If you're not, and shouldn't be, overly reliant on them, it's not that big of a deal. However, if there are particular targets with shorter time limits and you're not confident in having enough damage, double check if there are environmental hazards to drop on their sorry hides. Investigative nature. Of course, the overview is also great for selecting specific monsters and setting a waypoint for them. You can also choose to conduct a field survey, which is like a quest, and depart directly, which functions like the old school hunts if you're in another locale. Perhaps the best new feature is saving hunts as investigations and returning to them later. If you see a particular monster and want to hunt it later, spend some guild points and voila! Go to the handler, scroll down to investigations, select the one in question, and you can take it on. Extra innings. Each investigation gives you a set number of tries on top of other conditions, which may include less time. But what if you found a particularly lucrative hunt and want to maximize those benefits? Save it as an investigation first and then conduct a field survey, i.e. hunt it normally. You get the same rewards and the try doesn't count towards the investigation. Weapon of most trades. The handler will conduct a quiz to pick your weapon of choice, and everyone else will probably tell you that each has its strengths and weaknesses. You know all that, so instead I'm going to tell you why the sword and shield is the best, having spent 50 hours killing monsters with it in relative comfort. It deals good damage at a pretty rapid clip, you can bash monsters with the shield to flinch and eventually knock them down, the mobility is pretty good, it can block a hefty amount of damage, and some decorations will even reduce the pain from seemingly unblockable attacks. It can also initiate a power clash when blocking at the right moment, which is very easy to pull off. And while other weapons can mount monsters by jumping off the secret and attacking, the sword and shield has charge slash into jumping slash to use at any point. Also, with how good and forgiving perfect guard feels, you can get right up in a monster's face and continuously counter-hit them. While it's cited as the jack of all trades, the sword and shield is more than capable of piling on the damage when required. Perfectly mid. If you're a sword and shield aficionado, there's some bad news. Perfect Rush isn't quite so perfect anymore. It's a perfectly competent means of attacking and transitioning into a falling bash or jumping slash, leading into a mount. However, its damage output isn't comparable to World or even Rise, and I don't know why. Despite repeated attempts, it wasn't worth the risk or even the time spent performing on a downed monster. Maybe someone will figure out the best situation to use it, but until then, what's the alternative? Charged chops for days. The charged chop won't deal as much damage as a full perfect rush combo, but it's faster and has more control. Best of all, you can immediately roll out after performing it. When trying to flinch or stun a monster, I usually go for the shield attack, shield bash, hard bash, and spinning reaper combo. If there's an opening, then a charged chop would follow. Use a regular sword combo, then go for the shield bash combo and end it with a charged chop on a downed monster. It's pretty good damage, and you'll land all the hits before your target fully recovers. Running through. When a monster begins fleeing, your first instinct should be to hop on your mount. If they're not flying, try to catch up, run alongside, and then attack while your mount is sprinting. Sword and shield users can run their weapons across the monster, dealing more damage than a regular strike. You wound me. Wounds are a new mechanic in Monster Hunter Wilds, opening up after continuously attacking the same area on a monster. Using a focus strike, you can destroy the wound and deal a burst of damage. There are variations like the Gunlance's drill, but it's an extremely potent way to damage a monster and break off some materials while also inflicting stun. It's very, very good, and without getting into spoilers, some skills can make it even more potent later on. Just remember, after destroying a wound, you can't create any more in that specific area, so spread the wealth and the suffering all around. Wounds ahoy! While sometimes missing focus strikes on a monster, I noticed that the move itself can create wounds if it strikes somewhere else. This is probably the outcome of an already damaged area opening up, and though it may not seem that ideal compared to the usual method, it can be good in multiplayer. Occasionally, poke and prod the monster with focus strikes after dealing enough damage. If you see more than one instance of damage, then a wound may have just opened up, ripe for the stabbing. Wounded Mount. When mounting a monster, you can open up a wound quickly with heavy knife attacks. This can be attacked with your weapon for a big damage burst. While I would advise doing this to the monster's head, try to create wounds on its back or tail. Once it falls to the mounted attack, you can destroy those other wounds for extra damage and more materials. Go for the eyes. Enemies like Raidao and New Udra are the apex monsters of their respective regions, and have some very hard-hitting attacks. Raidao in particular unleashes some pretty hard-hitting thunder attacks from a distance, and it can seem challenging to get close and deal damage. However, if you activate focus mode after some thunder attacks, you'll notice its face crest glowing red, much like wounds. You can perform a focus strike on those for some much needed damage, though there's a brief window. It can't be done after every big thunder attack, but you'll get more than enough opportunities to dish out some pain. Skipping dinner. After helping out a village, you may occasionally get meal invites, which are more like feasts with the villagers. These are particularly great because A, they cost no resources, and B, you can receive some very potent skills with benefits lasting an hour. However, keep in mind that the invites won't last forever, with the villagers seemingly following the in-game day/night cycle. Dally too long, and it might be gone. On some occasions, I would even arrive at a village at night, only to find the offer disappeared upon my arrival. Long story short, even if you're still benefiting from a previous meal, don't ignore other offers if they have useful skills. Quick Swap. The weapon switching mechanic allows stowing a second weapon on your mount to swap whenever. The catch is that you must be on your mount, but this opens up some interesting tactics. Did you make that monster fall asleep thanks to your status-infused sword and shield? Swap to a greatsword for a strong wake-up attack. Maybe put down some explosive barrels, switch to the gunlance, and unleash wyvern fire for an explosive alarm. Branching out to other weapon types. Upon spending enough time with Monster Hunter Wilds, you probably want to try other weapon types. However, you may be hesitant about spending materials and Zenny, especially when upgrading to different rarities. Without going into spoilers, there is a way to obtain other weapons without spending either. It becomes available as you proceed through the story. Just ensure you have enough guild points handy.